Hello.
Hi. Correct. That's a nice place. What a nice you're looking. Such a beautiful.
I have to listen to the corporate bigwigs now.
Oh, which corporate bigwigs? Oh, corporate bigwigs like me, oh, who ask you to do these things.
So
Or
your husband has started work or no?
now he's been working. As in, he's not going,
Ah.
but he's been working.
But
We'll,
I went to Chembur today.
hmm.
Public is on the road.
Yeah, there's lots of janta on the road.
Yeah, Mazgaon and all is looking like busy.
You
But
know,
abhi, I feel now, I
today
think
is
they won't
exhausting.
start the public transport. We can't live like this. Did you read the Atul Gawande thing?
Yes. And I think he used some very interesting terminology from Gestalt and all that. So I have just skimmed through that article. I'm going to read it fully.
No, we can't live like this. Yeah, this virus is here to stay. We all need to be responsible socially.
And there will be some idiots, and I think there will be people who, like for other things, right? Like, I mean, stupidly infectious other things happen.
Nobody got worried about multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. One person dies every minute in this country
Wow.
of TB
Mm.
because people cough and spit like that.
Mm.
And you don't need an X-ray chest to board a plane.
Yeah. So you could be in a plane and catch, so not COVID, but you could catch tube TB. So there is something else at play here, right? Something else that happened with COVID that got our attention that much more.
I think it is the ease with which it transmits and the way the West behaved, the way the West
Yeah.
suffered. I think that sent the shock waves because the way it was in Italy, Spain, US, UK, that was like,
Where their healthcare system simply collapsed.
yeah,
They always had this pride of between Italy and France.
yeah,
They have been ranked as the number one and two healthcare systems,
yeah,
and US also. I mean, there's a whole. I wanted some coffee. I've asked for it. Let me just get it. Give me a sec.
yeah.
जैसे तुमको बाहर जाना है तो ऐसे मैं खोल देती हूँ मेरे को तंग मत करना I'm going to request everyone to put your ends on mute. It helps us stay focused, and we will start our session today. A very warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you for joining our second webinar. We will be having a discussion today.
Hi, Zal. Nice of you. 1 minute, huh? Bhavna, 1 second.
So while Rajam handles what has come up for her, what I will do is introduce the session today. We had our first webinar last week, and we promised to have regular webinars on a weekly basis so that we could help caregivers not just handle the current circumstances, but also get a handle on what is the challenges in the life of a caregiver and what is it that they can do differently. This series of webinars is called Compassionate Caring, and we like to believe that while caregivers offer compassionate caring, there might be an opportunity for them to look back and see how is it that they can provide wholesome compassionate caring to themselves and to everybody in the circumstance. I am delighted to have today with us Dr. Rajam, who was with us for the first webinar, where we had a panel discussion on caregiving, to be here today because we had a host of questions, lots of questions that participants came in with, and then they had while the webinar was on. And we thought it might be worth everyone's while that we address these questions because the time that we had last time was fairly limited. And we would like to have it as interactive and as responsive to people rather than it just be a one-way communication. I would like to start by introducing to you Caregiver Sathi. Caregiver Sathi is a social venture that aims to create an ecosystem of well-being and healing for the primary caregiver. Family caregivers of those navigating terminal illness, chronic, or any other life-limiting conditions have their unique challenges. So while they are dealing with a patient who has their own challenges, the family caregiver carries secondary stress or trauma, if you may, and they need support as well. So we support family caregivers through their caregiving journeys. We wish to enable an environment of well-being by empowering the caregiver and the care receiver to lead full lives. How do we do this? We are looking at three main areas to start with. The first is psychosocial support systems like easy access to information, relevant content, healing circles, which is our support group meetings, one-on-one counseling and coaching. The second main program or through which we want to enable and empower the caregivers is our volunteer programs that will provide respite care for caregivers. And thirdly, most importantly in these times and age, we would like to offer an ecosystem of well-being by looking at technology-based support to enable and empower caregivers and their well-being. I believe that many of the participants today are repeat participants from the first webinar, but I'd like to have a sense of how many are new. So those of you who are joining this webinar for the first time, if you could use the chat box to say, coming for the first time, I would really appreciate that. Having said that, moving on to introduce Dr. Rajam, who is a consultant pulmonologist and a palliative care physician, currently consulting with Bhatia and Hinduja hospitals in Mumbai. She focuses on non-cancer related palliative care. Yeah. I am delighted to have her here, and as you can imagine, although you can't see her on the screen, she will be back, is also because she's in a unique position. Dr. Rajam is an expert in pulmonology and palliative care, but she also handles the role of a caregiver in her personal life. So welcome Rakesh Tiku for joining for the first time. We hope that we will be able to make the connection for you from the previous session as well. So like I was saying, Rajam, I hope things are okay.
Yeah, I think was a little bit needing something, but anyway, tell me. Yeah, hi.
So I was at the point of saying exactly that, that not only are you somebody who's a doctor who has looked at caregivers as a professional, you are also a primary caregiver yourself, and that
Mhm.
puts you in a very unique position to offer compassionate caring. And we are delighted to have you with us. Not
Thank you. Thank you. I really hope I can be of some help and contribute, because I think all of us, like you've always mentioned, are have have had different roles of caregiving, whether it's parenting, whether it's somebody older, younger. So I think all of us will, or at some point, have been caregivers to various people in our lives.
Yeah, that is definitely true. So I love Rosalind Carter's quotation, guides me all the time, that there are only four types of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers.
Yeah.
And so many of us will be in these roles more than once, more than one way. So those of you who are joining us for the first time, please just drop a message in the chat box saying that you're coming in for the first time. It'll help us know how many of you are here new. I notice that two have said that they are joining for the first time. The rest, I suppose, joined for the first webinar. And the purpose of having this webinar today is to get a deeper insight into the life of a caregiver and to be able to address questions. One of the things that I often say, and that is that, caregiving is invisible, it is unrecognized, it is underappreciated, underserved, and deprioritized. And I think caregivers themselves are responsible for deprioritizing themselves more than anybody else. So one of the things that we would like to do through Caregiver Sati is to shine the light on caregivers and to say that caregivers are important by themselves. Of course, there is suffering and there is, um, there is pain that the patient or the care receiver is going through. Having said that, there is also enough and more support that the caregiver can need. And we would like to talk about that. And we would like to talk about what are the questions and concerns of caregivers who might not have any other space to be here and to be able to talk their concerns. So it is our endeavor to create safe spaces like healing circles or like one-on-one coaching and counseling spaces, or these webinars where caregivers can come and ask difficult questions that they may not have had any answers to. Yeah. So if I were to talk about these roles of, are you a caregiver or are you a well-wisher of a caregiver, or are you somebody who has been a caregiver? Can you tell me, all this is a question to the audience, can you let us know which role do you identify most with? So please use the chat box to let us know whether you are an active caregiver or you're a well-wisher of a caregiver or you have been a caregiver.
Should it be the polling or the chat box?
It's the polling requires a question to be put before. So this is the chat box.
Oh, because I can see it on the polling.
Is it on the polling? Okay.
Just see.
I'm not able.
That's right. If you click on the poll icon, you can see this. It just needs to be launched. Dr. Rajam, you can see it because you are the co-host.
Ah, okay.
Launched.
For some reason, I'm not able to access it, Anish.
The polling is on.
Okay.
It just now popped up on my screen. It just took a few seconds.
Okay, thank you. So it will come on your screen. Please participate in the poll so that we can get a sense of what is it that you identify with. And then I am going to request Anish to give us some admin announcements before we move on.
Okay, Bhavna, I messaged you that there seems to be some construction work or some generator in my background, so there might be a little disturbance. But I can still do the announcements if you prefer.
I can do the admin announcements. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that. Some challenge with technology today. All right, so we will spend the next 75 minutes to have a discussion around the world of caregivers and what might be compassionate caregiving. There are three parts to this webinar, and the three parts of this webinar are that we will speak about some of the things that we believe are the circumstances for caregivers between Dr. Rajam and I. The second section will be the question answer section where you can, so while we are having the discussion and the question answer exchange from the previous webinar, I will ask the questions and Dr. Rajam will help us address these questions. We will then move on to live questions. So the questions that are coming up now as a consequence of this conversation, please record them in the chat box. You are requested to keep your microphone muted at all times. This will minimize the background sounds. You can use the raise your hand feature, and one of us will connect and invite you to share, and at that time you can be unmuted. We have taken all appropriate security precautions so that this is a safe space. The whole objective of this webinar is not to allow anybody to participate, but to have a safe space of people who understand, respect, and are non-judgmental to caregivers. So please feel free to ask your questions, how much ever they may be dilemma-ridden or difficult. We have used encryption for third-party endpoints, that what is shared cannot be accessed digitally outside the meeting room. The instructions for each section of the webinar will be given, and the webinar is being recorded. The participants are requested not to record the meeting using any other device. We are recording this webinar. Some sections of the webinar, which is the part of the discussion, the expert advice, we may use for sharing later. There will be no section of the participant interaction that will be disclosed publicly. So please do not be anxious that either your identity or your questions or anything related to you may be shared. We may use some parts of this discussion, your questions, in order to design our future programs. We are finding that your participation is absolutely critical for us to be able to offer meaningful content that will be really relevant. So the more questions you ask, the better it is for not just you, but us, and for the future programs that we may have to offer. I'm going to repeat myself. Somebody who's on rebound at 1, could you please yourself on mute? I'm going to apply some post discretionary measures, and I find this new terminology of I'm going to mute you and I'm going to unmute you sometimes funny and sometimes very oppressive. I don't know what you have to say about that, Dr. Rajan.
Yeah, it's like you have the power to shut.
I can mute you. Okay. All right. So To start with, I am going to ask the first question. It's from, so I might not state the person who has asked this question, but let me start with this. I think this is from somebody who has a parent with an autoimmune condition. And the question is, I want to know all the ways that I can help my dad and delay the deterioration. So, what would you tell a caregiver who has that question or that anxiety?
So to begin with, I think the important thing is what the condition is. I know it's going to be a general discussion, but I think the age of the caregiver, I mean, the age of the patient, what condition the patient has, along with what other comorbidities he has, will all contribute to the caregiving nature. And what is the exact input from the physician who's treating the patient? Because not all autoimmune illnesses are totally debilitating. There are autoimmune diseases which can be really, really debilitating and requiring full care. But there are certain autoimmune diseases where patient can be still independent. So we really, it's a very difficult question to answer when we don't know exactly what we are dealing with or what I should be answering. So these things will make a difference. I think this is a quite a specific question. So probably a one-on-one will help, but I'm still free to, if I get some more information to, the person who's asked, we can do another specific session for this because it's a specific illness which is probably requires certain different nuances of caregiving related to that particular condition.
I read into the question, Dr. Raj, and what I hear is that this is a concerned child who is worried about the deterioration of the parent. My father is deteriorating and perhaps in an unnatural way. And I would like to, you know, prevent that or stall that for the best that I can and do everything possible. What I hear in that question is there is some anxiety about dealing with the fact that this is the condition, and there is a desire, a deep desire to do everything possible.
No, totally get that, which is why I said, there are certain autoimmunes which can be very debilitating. One, also as a condition, autoimmune diseases are not curable. They can only be kept under control, which is the discussion that takes to the next level as what, depending on what the condition is, then even if there, I appreciate the concern of the caregiver that he or she wants to do everything for the father, but I think the everything might not necessarily work in the best interest of the father. Therefore, it is important to know what he has, what is the level of the condition that he has, what is the physician saying about the seriousness of the condition, and depending on what the patient knows and wants to do, that should be our goal of looking after him. It's very different. What is good for me might not be necessarily good for the patient. So it's extremely important to rope in what the patient wants, because I think it's his body, his right, his care, and therefore involve the patient in a shared decision making. And it might not be aligned with what you want to do for your father, but at least you'll be happy that you're doing what he wants. So I think that is what is important. Sometimes we beat ourselves to kind of achieve something that probably is not possible, or even something closer to home that the patient doesn't even want. And are we beating ourselves unnecessarily to achieve something that is going to cause more harm? And then we take that as caregivers, we feel that we are doing so much, itna karne ke bawajud there is no sense of appreciation. So even if you're doing so much, you might not necessarily need to do so much if you have these difficult conversations with your patients.
So, what I take away from this is first recognizing what's happening to you is the first step. Second step is get information about the condition. The third step is um, recognize what the patient or the care receiver wants.
See, I think caregiving comes from the fact that there is a patient. So patient has to be the focus.
Yeah.
Patient must know about his illness. You try to, even if he knows, how much he understands is the second thing, how much he accepts is the third thing, and fourth is what he really wants to do with it, especially in conditions like autoimmune, which is to a far extent pretty incurable, because these are antibodies produced against your own, the body only produces it. So we can keep it curved, we can keep it controlled, but we can't cure it.
That's right. And also, I think that it is putting yourself under pressure to say, have I done everything to the best of capacity? Because then one is starting from a point of saying that you will never be able to. So this one of the watch outs for caregivers is to recognize that I will do the best that I can.
Correct.
It may not be everything under the sun.
Yeah, and sometimes what you want to do could also be way more than what is desired. See, some people do more than what they're told, and that also is a recipe for burnout. So one needs to therefore think what one can do in their own capacity without disturbing the balance of your own life, because I think you really need to be that full well person, well in the true sense, to look after somebody who is not well.
And that leads me to my second question, which is a very interesting segue. One of the questions was that how can a caregiver reduce the stress on themselves?
Yeah, so I think it has to be divided between this COVID times and non-COVID times, because I think even a simple thing in the COVID time can get heightened a lot, and if you're the only caregiver, can be very, very stressful. Plus, the amount of help you get from the medical fraternity in this COVID times is also quite sparse. People are scared to visit. Family doctors who were happy to do home visits are now thinking twice about visiting home. So it is different, it is challenging, but I think in your own way you need to slot your times with respect to sleep, with respect to eating. Give yourself time. Do like how you would nurture a baby. You catch your sleep, you do your cooking, you do your exercise the time the patient is resting. Use your time wisely. Please do remember that you might not be having solutions for everything. So learn to accept the shortcomings, and even better, vocalize those shortcomings, because then the person who is also being cared for realizes that you're trying and you're not able to do it. At least that's an acknowledgement which is works out very, very well. Say, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do in this, I'm trying to call ABC, or I'm trying to call a doctor, or I'm trying to get help, or I'm trying to get this medicine, and maybe it'll make a difference. But the fact that you should have that equation where you can tell the person in front of you that I'm trying, but it is not, so please bear with me.
What could be some of the symptoms or early signs that show that, the stress is reaching a level that it might, it's going beyond and it might lead to a burnout? What
So I
could be
think
some of
it
the
starts with simple things like being very anxious, not able to sleep, not finding interest in your whatever daily activities. And I think more so now, because your routine is upset, you are not having to get out of the house. I mean, I'm saying even caregivers, for example, you're not getting any help in terms of Ayaba is a ward boy who can share your physical load, at least, even if not the emotional and mental load. Or you're not getting out of the house to have a routine where you can meet four people, at work or in the train or in the bus, and just feel. Sometimes when you meet people, you realize that their lives are worse off than you, and you shouldn't be complaining. And so these things are not happening. So I think the fact that you're anxious, or you snap back at people, or you're not able to eat, you're not able to sleep, and you realize that you're not functioning your normal capacity. That's probably the beginning of that you really need help, or you need a break.
I have found some of the other symptoms being, for example, I think your skin starts to tell you, right?
Yeah.
For example, if you have a very dry skin or you're breaking out,
Dark circles.
dark circles, your body starts to tell you when you are noticing. So I think spending some time to just watch your body, even
Yeah.
your breath. For example, are you breathing very shallow or are you really able to breathe deeply? Are you feeling irritable or are you feeling, like you said, snapping at someone? Or are you feeling disinterested or are you feeling like, it's just futile? All these are probably signs, or absolute irritability could also be symptoms of feeling stressed and could be early signs of a burnout. Yeah.
True.
I also think that sometimes putting you know weight,
Putting, losing,
losing, either way, could be
yeah,
signs of stress catching up on you.
biting nails, pacing up and down,
Mm,
or even your blood works going haywire,
mm,
sugar, blood pressure, if you're in that category with the high risk for all these things to show up, because
mm.
everything adds up to your stress.
Yes. So the other question is that, how do I create time for myself? Because I'm a caregiver and I have pretty much a 24 by 7 caregiving job. So what can I do? Because, there is no time for me.
So if you're really the only person in the house besides the patient, then it can be really, really tough. But suppose you have a family, like a child or a maid, if you're lucky, or a spouse, then you can actually divide the time where you can make the child sit with the caregiver when the caregiver is resting to do the homework or the coloring or those kind of things with the caregiver, so that the caregiver is the patient is supervised. Or the time out for you is typically when the patient is asleep or the patient is comfortable. You take that little bit me time where you either stay up for half an hour or you get up half an hour early to just get that me time to meditate, exercise, relax, or listen to music, or drink your cup of coffee by talking to yourself or talking to your best friend or something like that. You need to steal that half an hour, 45 minutes. Now these days, I suppose, I can't even advise you to go out and walk unless you have a place to walk. But if some kind of exercise definitely helps you, it could be running up and down stairs, it could be doing yoga at home, it could be anything, or a walk, simply because exercise releases endorphins, and that kind of gives you the happy sensation in the given circumstances, whatever that might be. It might not be your original level of sanity or happiness, but at least it doesn't make you completely nuts. I know it's difficult to sometimes even steal that half an hour, but maybe when you go for a shower, you can make that an extended 10-15 minutes in the shower, so that you can do your chanting or you can just sit peacefully, because that's one place where probably nobody will come. Hopefully, nobody will come knocking.
Yeah, we know that there are many of those things, especially when they're mothers, like, like there's no peace even in the bathroom. But
Yeah.
that said, I do think that, um, you know, there may be a possibility. So we might have some or many caregivers who feel that there are no other people around. So I don't have help. There isn't too many of other family members that I can negotiate or get the respite from.
Hmm.
In that case, what do I do? I have found that some caregivers speak about that it is actually possible to negotiate or to have that conversation even with the patient. Actually, if you were to find some way of having that conversation with the patient, unless there is absolutely zero cognitive ability, which might be the case as well, but I think being determined about your me time is the key. What do you think about that?
So I think to start with, the caregiving culture in India is the fact that caregivers need to recognize the need for me time.
Yeah,
I think it starts with that.
yeah,
And I think it can start even with a simple 10 to 20 minutes. Like, I always maintain this about mothers who leave their children and go to work. The fact that you leave the patient for 10, 15, 20 minutes or half an hour or 1 hour doesn't mean that you love them any less or you care for them any less.
right.
So I don't think, taking that half an hour or 1 hour really if is going to make the caregiving experience or the care experience for the patient any less. Like you said, it is extremely crucial to have this conversation with the patient.
Mm.
And also amongst patients, especially if the patient can respond, there are patients who like to be constantly cajoled. There
Mm.
are patients who like to be left alone. So if
Yeah,
there are patients who are like to be left alone, then you take that opportunity, because it is irritating to the patient also, and you're not serving the purpose. You
yeah,
want to constantly do something, you can do in the background, make some meal for them, or prepare a massage for them, or put music for them, but you don't have to actually be there.
that's right.
So if the patient is the one who's constantly the one requiring attention, that is a challenge, because if you're the only one, then it's really your, you really don't, sometimes you don't find the time to go to the loo, etc. But somewhere I still feel that you should have that conversation with the patient that I need my space. Please give me, let's decide this, since it's going to be a long haul. And if the patient understands this condition, if the patient doesn't, then the patient should be explained, and ideally involve the doctor to explain that this is what is going to happen, this is the time frame, or this is the road ahead, the roadmap. So the patient is also prepared. Having said that, the fact that he's unwell, he might still keep coming back to, oh God, how long is it going to take? But I think it's important to have that conversation with the patient that, look, this is the time I will need to, not be here physically, but if you need something, you can call me. Or if you can wait, then wait till this time. Give him a watch, give him something like a music or a TV in his room, so that he can wait for that particular time to call you. And then you, obviously, being the responsible person, will turn up, before that. Or
That's right. That's right. So, and related to this is like, how do I can convince an elderly person that he or she is fine?
so, I think in this respect, a family caregiver doesn't serve the purpose. In fact, I myself, being the doctor in the family, it is ghar ki murgi. I almost always call my friends to talk to my mom, to
Mm.
tell her, for example, that this is going to take time. This is, at your age, I know it's difficult, but you're doing so much. I am doing so much. So it almost always helps to get another person to talk, and definitely a healthcare profession makes a difference. Saying that, for example, acknowledge with the patient that yes, it's difficult, acknowledge it's going to take time, acknowledge that he or she is doing all the right things, and this is going to be the way forward. Those kind of things. And I don't think it's easy. For example, a person who's a non-doctor, the patient can easily say, how do you know you're not a doctor? And for person, somebody like me, my mother says, you're saying that because you want me to feel good.
Mm.
So if you do, you're doomed. If you don't, you're doomed. So it's best to involve a third person,
Yeah.
friend, or a doctor friend, or a physiotherapist, so that whatever the patient is going through, it gets validated by somebody else, and it's not that you have giving them false impressions of what's going to happen.
I think it's also important to understand that in the caregiver care receiver relationship, there is an emotional stake, right? And
Sure.
there is an expectation from both sides. So it's a lot easier for me to talk to, for example, I hope my mother is not logged in today, but it's a lot easier for me to talk to my friend's mother than it is to talk to my
It's to
mother's.
everybody, I think. Yeah, sure, totally. I think it's for everybody, and you should take in the help of your friend, your neighbor, or your mother's friend, or somebody who's gone through it, like a support group in your own this thing.
Yes, yes. And linked to that would be the next question that I will pick up from this very long list of questions is, what can be the emotional and mental impact on the caregivers in a family? So, like, let's kind of get a grasp of what can long-term or difficult caregiving do to a caregiver.
Oh, this is a very, very challenging thing. For example, I think right from uh, losing your me time,
Mm.
as in your normal time of when you want to get up, what you want to do, it's all dictated by the patient.
Yeah.
So a lot of it gets, oh God, it's 7 o'clock, it's this pill time, it's 8 o'clock, it's breakfast time. So, bath time, a lot of it, your life timetable is changed based on the routine of the patient.
Yeah.
Second thing it comes to is your balance with your own personal relationships. For example, your children, because I think the majority of caregiving starts at the age of, say, probably, I mean, if everything goes well and your parents remain well for a long time, it starts somewhere between the ages of 25 to 45, 55, especially if it's caregiving of the elders. And that's when you start family. You have other family members, in laws, husband, children, or sometimes even children's spouses. So I think that equation is very, it needs to be balanced a lot. I think these days, since we're having more and more elders, people are cognizant of the fact that you could have an elderly to look after, and so they could be a little bit more relaxed in their demands, but it not necessarily so I think this balance between your personal relationships and the relationship of looking after the parent is the second one that gets. For example, like last like 2 3 weeks ago, I had to spend all my nights with my mom because she had to be woken up, and she was feeling guilty that I, because of her, I was not sleeping in my bed with my husband, and I was okay. We have had the conversation, but the whole process for her to accept, I'm ruining your relationship. You got married late. I shouldn't be the one who's, now literally in the middle of your relationship. So I think those things also make a difference. Professionally, if you've not slept a whole night, it's not easy to then get up, manage the house, go for a 9 o'clock job, 9 to 5 job, or these days there's no 9 to 5 jobs. It's kind of almost 24 hours. It's difficult to climb the professional ladder if you have so much going on in the house. Then I think even among siblings, see, parents also get used to the way you look after the parent, and then comparative notes happen when the other sibling comes, and you think it's your time to get respite, but then you realize that the parent is not happy, saying she doesn't wash me right, or she doesn't, the sequence is not right of the powder and the ointment and the tikli and the bindi and the food, everything gets, it's all hodgepodge, she's not as organized as you. So that also, then you feel, compels that, oh god, if I go on listening, she's going to get less care. But you must remember that she's as much as a mother to your sister or brother as it is to you. So it's equal responsibility. It's not that you should be taking more care or less care. I mean, when you do it, you're there 100%.
In my studies, I have found that, caregivers actually think that, they are the best at caregiving, and therefore they find it very hard to let somebody else handle that responsibility. And I think, in addition to carve out me time, I think accepting that there will be different types of care, and each person will offer the care according
Known
to
best.
who they are, and it is okay, because this is not a competition, because this is not something that should be met with certain standards alone, and something is best. I think a good intention is all that matters. It doesn't have to be in the same way. um, I actually had a very similar incident, but that was more around bringing up my daughter, between my husband and I. And my husband one day told me, he's like, "You give me so many instructions, I cannot handle it in your way. I will be the kind of parent that I will be."
True. It is about, I mean, parenting is also a kind of caregiving.
Yeah,
This, of course, is somebody who can't do things similarly like a child, right? So
yeah,
I think that is also an important discussion, and it's okay for the sibling to look after the way he or she does, because that's the way he or she knows.
that's
So
right.
it's, nothing is right or wrong, and you really do need a break. I think there was some question there about how to make a caregiver realize that you need a break
Yeah,
or not, and I think everybody needs a break, and you need a break every day,
yes,
even if it's for 10 minutes.
correct. So I think, going back to that question about what can happen because of stress to a caregiver, I can say some really dramatic and drastic things. So, for example, there is, of course, there is all kinds of emotions that a caregiver doesn't express. So, whether it is feeling guilty, whether it's feeling sad, whether it is feeling responsible, or whether it's feeling inadequate, because, there's always something more and better that could have been done. When these feelings are not expressed and they stay suppressed with the caregiver, then these repressed emotions can cause all kinds of things. They can lead to mental health issues.
Yeah, that's I hadn't reached there about depression, about losing jobs, about moving cities, so losing your basic social life.
Right.
And also, I think a lot of people get bitter
Yes.
with the fact that this has happened and they have lost 3 4 years of their lives,
Yes.
and they actually quite, yeah, recluse,
Yeah.
depressed.
Actually, I feel that if caregivers do not handle stuff, don't go overboard, if they do not handle it in a measured, contained way, then resentments build up, not just towards the patient, sometimes towards other relatives, sometimes towards the rest of the world. And that can be very debilitating because resentments are corrosive to you. They may not impact the world around you, but resentments hold you back from living a full life. And of course there are other implications of uh, caregiving when not handled well. There is a very sad statistic apparently that nearly a very high percentage of suicides are correlated with long-term caregiving. So there is a certain feeling of futility and a certain loss of faith in life. There is another question about how do you deal with mood swings and depression. So I don't know whether this is about the patient or it is about the caregiver. Let's assume that this is for the caregiver.
If it is for the caregiver definitely need, and if the caregivers recognize the change in his behavior, then definitely needs a professional help. And that brings me to the point that it is absolutely okay to take yourself to a counselor.
Mm,
I did too. And I did it when even my 85-year-old father took ill. I
mm,
just couldn't accept it. And it was my mother who said, how are you being so irrational? If
mm,
it is, if an 85-year-old doesn't fall ill, who will?
mm, mm,
Do take yourself to a counselor, and it's quite nice the way they give you the professional tips of how to deal with it, because I used to jump out of my skin every time the phone rang, and
mm,
it is completely not normal.
mm,
And there are sometimes I know my husband is kind of poking fun at me when he says these things, but I know it's made a difference to him also the way I react.
mm,
Because even if we are having a conversation and the phone rings, obviously my priority is towards the phone. I completely disregard what he was saying.
mm.
And I think that's where it helps to because the only thing I think you can control is your reactions and actions. Therefore, if you have noticed yourself to be depressed or irritable or snapping at people, you must take yourself to a professional help, because I don't think a healthcare profession who's not trained in counseling can help you give those tips. You need to have those sessions. You need to, once you've recognized, it's half the battle won, but you need to get to the professional help, because it'll make you a much better person to be able to help the patient.
There's a strange cackling sound. Can you hear that, Rajan? Because
No,
somebody's typing. So it's not at my.
can't hear.
Okay. It seems like as if somebody is typing and that is getting picked up. Though of course everybody is mute. Okay, it seems to have gone now. But I also think that ah, so it looks like it's your beads that are coming close to the mic.
Oh,
Pretty jewelry. Okay. Um, Thank you for that, Satya. That was very insightful diagnosis of the sound. Yes. So, Rajan, the other thing is about mood swings and depression. I think some of the other tips could be, in addition to going to professional help, like a counselor or maybe a coach, who can help you deal with what your circumstance is. I think understanding your me time and understanding activities that give you stillness and joy, whether it is meditation or it is any hobby could be other practices that help you deal with the variety of moods and you know the impact of caregiving.
Yeah, reading music, playing an instrument, singing, walking, watching TV, mindless TV,
Mm.
binge watching a movie, anything that you definitely, everybody needs a break every day. It's like going to work and you can't go to your desk and work 9 to 5 continuously. You get up, go for a walk, go to the loo, go for a coffee, stretch, lunch. So those things you need to do even at home if you're going to be the main caregiver. There is
There is another question here about, how do I get her interested in hobbies again? I am assuming this is a caregiver talking about a patient, saying that how do I get the patient interested in their hobbies? So, or we can also look at it, how do I get a caregiver interested in their hobbies?
So I think the hobby comes when your main distressing symptoms are at least under control.
Mm,
For example, you can't think of coloring or listening to music if you're in agony,
mm,
or if you're breathless,
mm,
or if you are, distressed about something. So at least the physical symptoms need to be in some kind of control. It may not be gone, but you
mm,
can't expect a breathless patient to enjoy music.
yeah.
So at least some first try the medications, try the non-pharmacological methods of distraction, massage, or fan, of all those kind of things. But you need to be sure that the person is comfortable
Mm,
physically
mm,
to enjoy a mental distraction or a hobby. I think that's important. So you will need the help of a healthcare profession. And then I think you start with simple things. For example, some of the things I've realized that can help is connecting to an old cousin or
mm,
an old friend by phone,
mm,
just exchanging notes or of the patient,
mm,
or connecting, say, to some music, or sit and chat about old times, which brings joy to them. Sit and look at old albums. These are the small things that you can do at home without much paraphernalia, or play a board game if the person is able to sit up and play a board game, or even lie down and play a board game.
yeah.
Video calls with family who are abroad. So
Yeah.
even if it's a 10 minute, it's a 10 minute thing of forgetting that particular, cooking the interesting thing. Suppose a person likes a particular food, so
Mm.
cook that, so that the patient also realizes that you're wanting to please the patient.
And as you were speaking all of this, what I was realizing was that a well-wisher of a caregiver can do the same things for the caregiver,
Absolutely.
right? So how do you get a caregiver interested in their hobbies? I think, encouraging them to take baby steps, but doing small gestures for the caregivers, like making something, like everybody asks a patient, right? How are you? And can I make a nice dish for you? How about doing that for a caregiver,
Hmm.
right? There is a question, and I think you had alluded to this, so I'm going to bring this up now, which is how can I care for the patient in the COVID situation
Hmm.
without having much help? So clearly, there is stress. I don't have help. What would you advise in addition to, create time slots and have me time?
Yeah, I think maybe in this respect, it depends on the kind of building you're living in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it helps to just write to the management committee saying, this is the situation. So take proper permission to get some help. If you can, identify somebody to come and stay.
Okay.
Some societies are allowing, after the necessary checks, like whatever Aadhaar, this, that, temperature check,
Mhm.
where the person is coming from, all those things.
Yeah.
And the person is instructed to stay in your house
Yeah.
only and not go and come, because even public transport is an issue.
Yes.
Second thing is, if you create your own network of people in your society, so even if you have 3 4 friends,
Yeah.
with social distancing and with appropriate hygiene, masks, everything, at least the person can come and sit
Very good idea.
at a 6 foot distance maybe chat with you, maybe chat with the patient,
Mm.
just a distraction, because sometimes the same thing, the tone, everything can get very monotonous for the patient and for the caregiver.
Yes.
Other thing is to be honest upfront and actually ask for people to help you with the cooking. They
Mm.
might not necessarily be giving you the full meal, but you probably can make the rice or roti, and you could ask, give a roster. If you're very good friends, you could make a roster as Monday one friend, Tuesday one friend. At least send something.
Mm.
It might not be everything, so that you can at least focus that time for yourself or for the patient and not be in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So it might be one dal, one sabzi,
Yeah.
one pasta, something, and you can focus on the dietary needs of the patient. And sometimes it also helps a change of taste for the patient.
Mm.
Wohi kha ke, they also get bored.
Mm. Yes.
So that also, if you are in a society which is like a cooperative society, literally and figuratively, and you are the friendly kind. See, there are many people who won't ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there are people who will offer help.
Yeah.
Don't deny that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that will ease you, that will make the other person feel well, and maybe it'll also help the patient. So
Yes.
in a COVID situation especially, I think you need to relax your that wall around yourself. If you're a very private person, people are happy to help. Take that help.
That's a very good point. I think reaching out and asking for help or taking help if it is being offered to you.
Totally.
I totally love the idea of making a roster of your friends and saying Monday ko tumhara kaam hai, Tuesday ko tumhara kaam.
At least everybody is not burdened, and you just tell them that you cook extra for me, so that it's not like you're cooking separate.
Yes.
Whatever you're doing, ek muthi zyada, so that I get it. It's a pulao or a khichdi or whatever it can be.
Yes. I think that's absolutely quite.
And in Bombay, actually, I see that problem in places like Delhi and Chennai, where people live on their own in independent houses.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a big plus point of Mumbai, where at least you have neighbors.
Yes.
Not everywhere you have friendly neighbors, but where you do,
Yes.
I think you should make a good use of that.
So I think what you need to do is step back and say what is absolutely essential that
Totally.
I need to do,
Yeah.
so that you can really pare down your work to just that,
Yeah.
and everything else find who can help you with,
Totally.
right? So in this time, I think especially if you don't have any other help, how can you reduce the kind of work that you're doing and get people to support you? So um, and I think finding some creative solutions will be very interesting, right? I would be
even
so keen.
even the fact of I think even a good catharsis with a friend, that 10 minutes of complaining about your responsibilities, what you're facing, complain about the patient in the sense that I can't do this, I can't do that, or this has been difficult for me, what do I do? Maybe some talking to somebody else, they will say, Acha, why don't you contact this doctor,
Yeah.
or why don't you contact this person, or why don't you do a Zoom physio session, or
Right.
a Zoom dietitian session, or Zoom counseling session. You never know, something will work out. I think you won't, unless you ask, you'll never know what is in store for you. You need to start talking and opening up.
Right. And I think that a lot of people are kind and a lot of people are willing to help. In fact, our research also suggests that when there are well wishers around caregivers, they sometimes don't know what help you need. So, caregivers need to get very specific about, I want this from you. So, which can be an exchange. So, it doesn't need to be like, for example, if I were to ask my neighbor and say, I want you to do this for me, she can come back and say, I can't do this, but can I do that?
Yeah.
So, it's an exchange, but you are enlisting and enrolling more people.
And I have found that even in this building, I know very few people. But when you go down in this thing to buy milk or pick up the grocery delivery, and when you share with absolute stranger, they're happy to help you. They say things like, can I send you something, or can I tell my maid to come and sit
Hmm.
so that you go? And absolute strangers, they're happy to do that little bit. But you need to let your guard down.
Yes. And linked to this is the question about how do you encourage the caregiver to ask for support? So this is possibly a question of a well-wisher who is seeing the plight of the caregiver who is struggling but not asking for help. What can a well-wisher do to encourage the caregiver to ask for support?
See, sometimes also caregivers feel that how can I ask this from somebody else?
Right.
And sometimes they feel belittled that why did he ask me this question? Am I not doing it right?
Hmm.
So, the well wisher needs to ask in such a manner which is less insulting and obtrusive for both the patient and the caregiver.
Give an example, please.
So, for example, like, instead of saying, for example, a well wisher, instead of saying that, look, can I cook for you? The well wisher can actually call up and say, today I've made this a lot of khichdi and would you like to taste some, and send that across. So maybe that take, and the quantity you send is an indicator to the caregiver that he or she does not have to cook.
Hmm.
Also the timing of the day, so if you're bright and early by 11, if you send that meal, then you know that the caregiver doesn't have to cook for that afternoon lunch. So it's the knack in which you say, for example, or you can offer saying, okay, your delivery is coming, do you want me to pick up? I'm going down to pick up mine.
Correct.
So it's one job saved of wearing the mask, taking the keys, going down, etc. Or some things like, suppose in the conversation says, "Mera gas cylinder khatam ho gaya." So okay, I'm ordering mine. I can go and pick up both. I will see to it that I get both in a trolley up or something like that. So those small gestures, then at least the guard of the caregiver falls. Okay, this person is willing. It's not trying to put the caregiver down. It's just complimenting to the caregiver. So the way it's all a communication of how you talk to people. Instead of saying, look, can I send you something? Or I can see that you have lack of time, I will cook and send. That could be something like, oh God, I'm not even able to manage my own life. Instead, if you could say, I have this truckload of pav bhaji that I've made, can I send some over? Or does your mom like pav bhaji? Or do you like, something like that. So I think it makes a lot of difference when the way you word it.
Correct. I'm going to remind you about your beads and the
Okay.
phone, and then get back to this. I think what I will put it in this language that I think respecting the dignity and offering compassion to the caregiver
Yeah.
because they're doing their best.
Yeah.
So being mindful of that, when as a well-wisher, I am not, I cannot be seen as an affront to the kind of work that the person is doing, but I am still offering help is the key. And maybe as a well-wisher, I need to recognize that my intention is to support the caregiver. How can I hold the dignity of the caregiver, be compassionate, and offer help?
And one big thing is be appreciative of that.
Yeah,
See, very often patients might not be in the physical wherewithal to say, you're doing such an excellent job of looking after me. Appreciation, gratitude, I think it's a big reward for any caregiver.
mm,
Saying thank you, so you're doing so much for me, or you're doing such a wonderful job,
right.
and I wouldn't be able to do such a good job, or there might be very few people like you who could do this.
Yeah.
Appreciation, and it makes a huge difference for the caregiver. I think it's a big boost for them also.
Yeah, I think, like leaving something to the idea that, oh, this is your responsibility and this is
Correct.
your duty
Yeah.
is actually not recognizing or appreciating what the person may be struggling with or going through or trying to overcome as well. So I'll move on to the next question, which says that, you know, uh, how do we motivate as a caregiver? How do we motivate the recipient who does not want to be motivated or change anything?
So this is difficult. I mean, you could. It depends how close this is respect to caregivers needing support, right? So this depends on how your equation with the caregiver is,
Mhm.
and you need to explore what his apprehensions are to get that kind of help. And you can only try if the caregiver is very stoic. Like, I have a patient of mine who's a friend of mine whose mother has had a stroke now since almost 18 months. She has moved lock, stock, barrel from Bangalore and come to stay with her mom. I got to know of her mom, so I said I should just go and meet her, not as a palliative care physician, just as a friend. And there are some things I said which I could clearly see her face fall. And I knew I was not welcome there. She has a father who also who's 85 or 89. Her mother was 82. And I could see she was crumbling. Her only sibling, her brother, was in London. She had issues with help coming even pre-COVID. She had a father who refused to enter the room of the mother because he was very clear he didn't want to see his spouse like this. So it was 2 months since he entered the room of his spouse.
Wow.
And she was dealing with, but she wanted her mother to return back to normal. And just because I said this is not happening, I could see her face fall. And I think she didn't tell me to leave, but it was very, very evident. So I could only try. So every month I send her a message because I know I'm not welcome, but I just send her a message saying I'm there. So I know even if well-wishers are trying to help caregivers, you have to be prepared for the fact that they might not be in a frame of mind to accept your help and not take it personally saying, he rejected me, now I'm not going to help him. इतना ट्राई किया फिर भी नहीं भाव देते, भलाई का जमाना नहीं है. It's very difficult to understand what a caregiver is going through. So I think somewhere we really need to, okay, like they say, na apna bhi time aayega, they will also thaw. They will also realize.
Yeah.
They sometimes they need time and people are different.
That's right. No, I think that's absolutely well said, because I think caregivers feel misunderstood. Well-wishers also feel that we are doing our best, but our best intentions are not being received. So there are possibly gaps, and we need to be patient and non-judgmental with each other. One of the ways to deal with this is to attend support group meetings, because I think those are spaces in which you can deal with things that are difficult for you. You come across other caregivers who probably have dealt with some of this stuff, or who can give you tips.
Another important thing is kindness. And kindness you can show in any way. Somewhere in our society now that seems to become less and less. And I think that can help a lot. Just to make the other person show kindness. I think very, very important.
A big challenge of caregiving and caregivers is dealing with the end of the caregiving journey, and the whole, there is a kind of anticipatory grief that the caregiver carries. And then there is the eventuality, because, well, if there is nobody who was born that wouldn't have to pass on. So what would you say about grief for caregivers?
I think grief is a very, very personal thing. And like happiness, it's different for different people. The volume, the way you cope with it, the way you share with it, what makes you overcome grief is very, very different. And I think it's very wrong to actually expect people to just up and move on. I think they say that very often you move with it.
That's right.
To move on is something might not happen to everybody. And so I think, like when it comes to autonomy in taking care of medical decisions of what you want to be done to yourself, I think grief is also something you need to make clear to the person that, okay, I'm here. When you need, what you need, how you need, you tell me. We are in this together. I can support you in any way.
That's right.
Instead of saying, ye karo, ye karna chahiye tha, wo bolo, idhar jana chahiye tha. I don't think it helps. I think the person withdraws more in his shell.
Yeah.
just hearing and being there makes a big difference.
So I'll go back to the key point for the caregiver, being able to recognize that feeling grief is okay. And feeling grief for or feeling sad for the loss of your loved one, for your relationship, for as long as you want to feel it. Because there is no prescribed time limit, right? You have to grieve for only this long and you have to grieve in only this way. I suppose you just said it, that there are each individual's ways. It can be as long or as unique as possible.
In fact, I would also like to add there are people who will comment on the person not grieving also.
Always.
And which is also fine. I mean, I think to each his own. And like it is in happiness, like it is in joy, grief can be very, very differently dealt by different people.
That's right. And some people are private and some people like to deal with it or process it in their own time, and that should be okay. I know for sure that for myself, I took a very long time to deal with the loss of my father, and I did not like the idea of being told, that I did not grieve. Uh, I like to believe that I was calm, composed, and collected. And so I think that caregivers need to acknowledge that they will feel.
So on Facebook, recently, I have come across this recently in the past, maybe 6, 8 months, of this lady called Megan Devine. Am I saying it right? About refuge in grief.
Yes,
Some things she writes, some of the thing is so good,
yeah,
and so it's kind of. I think she writes very variety of emotions. So some, one of each of us might find something to relate to. And grief is such a personal thing. It's very difficult to, and I think, see, your own grief is something, and for, like you said about losing your father and how it was, how your mother felt through it is something that is completely different.
that's right.
Here you're trying to come to terms with your own loss,
Yeah,
but her loss is completely different.
yeah,
In fact, I feel that melancholy in the eyes never go.
yeah.
You
And
know.
even between siblings, right? Each relationship will have
Yes.
their own unique dimension, their own unique shape. So how I look at my loss will be very different from how somebody else looks at it. But for someone who may have recently lost, I do think that unfortunately, I find that grief and grieving is um, is considered not okay, and that's unfortunate. But moving on or getting on with life very quickly is seen as more valuable. And I would like all caregivers, at least on this webinar and maybe otherwise, to believe that it is okay to grieve for as long as you wish to, in the ways that you want to. Some of the practices can be about, you do something to honor that person. You do something to honor that relationship, whether it is writing, it is visiting a place, it is cooking, it is describing that person to someone. You can have your own ways of honoring that relationship.
And I think grief also has become complicated in this pandemic,
Yes,
not just because of the illness,
yes,
not people only dying of COVID, it's also people who are not dying of non-COVID,
that's
because you're not having people for support.
yes,
Even if you see people, you can't hug them.
yes,
You might not have enough people for funeral.
yeah,
So you have to probably do everything physically, also for the funeral. It's not like somebody's taking care of it.
yeah,
So grief also has taken a very different turn in this whole situation because of the lack of siblings, children are not able to come.
yes.
So, a time where family should be together is not together. Friends are not able to come. You need special permissions. And so it's very, very complex. I cannot even imagine what people are going through when they're losing their loved ones now, because it's so difficult.
And I think above all, it is very important to talk about.
Yes.
To talk about without the fear of retribution, to talk about it without the fear of criticism, to talk about it saying that this is what I'm experiencing is absolutely essential to appreciate grief. I noticed that um, there are some questions which are on the.
Somebody's raised a hand also, I think.
Yes, so I'm going to request Anish to help me with that and point me to a question from the audience that might be live right now. We are moving on to the second section of our discussion where I will encourage you to type your question or raise your hand so that we can ask you to speak up. Is there anyone who would have questions on for Dr. Rajam or me? Where do you stand on the ethics of using necessary medication for reluctant patients, painkillers and antidepressants?
It's a very good question, but again, I think you need to come to exploring why the patient doesn't want to take it, what the condition is, and even if after all that, if the patient is refusing to take it, then it is really, if he's doing it in the right mental capacity, then it is really his decision. But if you can also try and convince the patient that him not taking the medication is also affecting your life, because these are this caregiving is not the professional caregiving, it is the family caregiver who's looking after the patients. So you can have an emotional discussion saying how it will ease up your life and that you're doing me a favor by taking these things, and in the process I will be able to look after you better, you will sleep better, you will eat better, the mood in the house will improve. So you can try negotiations, you can try the exploring. And then also, if the patient is being adamant,
Yeah.
in certain situations, especially antidepressants, if it involves children, etc., you can, with the consent of a doctor or a family doctor and with another family member, try and mix it with medications like which are camouflaged in dahi, juice, etc. But I think it is, you feel a bit not right doing it, but as far as possible, you need to try and explore why the person doesn't want to take it, how it will improve his and your quality of life, and that you'll do each other a great service by taking it.
I think that's great advice. I think because
And if it's the size of the tablet or the bitterness of the tablet, those things will come out in these discussions. Then you can do things like honey, crush, mix it in juice with the acknowledgement of the patient.
I think the consent and the acknowledgement of the patient becomes absolutely necessary because
Yeah.
the person feels like I have the right on
Yes.
my.
But again, if it comes to young children, say under 18, etc., who don't understand, then it's a different situation. You still need to respect their autonomy, discuss with them, treat them as adults. But if it's something that they're not understanding, then it's difficult. It is a difficult situation. I mean, I have not faced it. I've had extremely, in fact, the other end. My parents were, both dad and now mom are so cooperative that I get upset at the level of cooperation. They're so saying, okay, ye bhi karo, wo bhi karo, kuch bhi karo. We are in your hands. That also is difficult to handle because then you're responsible for everything that you do.
Right, right. There are a couple of questions. I will wait for other people. Is there an organization that checks up on the elderly in the caregiver's absence? For example, going for holiday. So I know that this question came last time. There are a couple of organizations that are offering this kind of help. And yes, there are organizations that will provide you support at the time that you are traveling, and they will check in on your parents. In fact, some of the organizations now are also offering for long distance caregiving. So, the caregiver is not cohabiting with the person who is elderly or unwell. So, from long distance, how can I provide a good infrastructure to the person, to my parents who live in another city or whatever? Then there are these organizations that provide companions or people that can help also in the case of emergency. Right? Okay, Ara, do you have a question?
Preeti is asking.
Okay, it's good to
Hi.
see you, Ara.
Hi, Bhavna.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Hi. Hello, Dr. Rajan.
Hi, hi.
I have a question here, actually.
Sure.
Can I ask one now?
Your name is?
My name is Dhanashri.
Okay, hi,
Yeah.
Dhanashri.
Hi. It's a lovely session, actually. I'm quite, though the topic is a little, not that happy one, but the discussion around it is superb. So it's very nice. A lot of stuff that we can learn from. I have a question. My mom is 75 years old, and she's a person who's very, very calm. I don't know, just wait for a minute.
Sorry,
Yeah,
can you repeat that question?
yeah, sure. So my mom is 75 years old, and should I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom is 75 years old, and she's hypertensive. She's diabetic also. In spite of all her health issues, in so many years, I'm 44 now. In so many years, I have never seen her getting anxious or seen her low or anything like that. She's always very supportive, very positive. But recently in these COVID times, very recently, she one evening said to me that, she's not even the one, she's always been a housewife, a homemaker. So she's not the one who's always been going out and going to malls or meeting friends or nothing like that. But she said, that I feel like going somewhere right now. I mean, I just realized from that statement that she was feeling very low. The other thing is she's extremely tolerant. I mean, her tolerance levels are like the threshold is pretty high, and she never complains. So if ever she talks about something or she complains, then we know that the problem is so severe that she can't handle it anymore, and only then she will very in a very subtle manner say something, because her basic concern is that because of her I shouldn't get bothered or troubled.
Hmm.
So I just want to understand that in a situation like this, where we are facing, this pandemic, where we can't step out. My mother can't go meet her. My older sister, who's a doctor, and she's attached to Nanavati Hospital. She's also, we're talking about COVID all the time. Uh, so we've stopped watching the news actually, because it's quite depressing. So I just want to understand from you that for a person like my mother, what is it that I can do in those moments, or what is it that I can say in those moments to her, um, that will make her feel better at that very moment. How do I give her that
So,
hope?
firstly, do you live in the same house as her? No.
Yes.
You're
So
living
my
with
mom
her.
stays with me. Yes.
Oh, great. So
Yeah.
she's there in front of you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And you know your mom way better than I ever will. What gives her interest? Is it gardening? Is it cooking? Is it Ludo? Is it Scrabble? Is it coloring?
she
Is it
she
TV?
loves music.
Huh?
She loves music. Yeah, she loves
So,
music. So
there are lots of these music sessions online, like concerts,
yeah,
NCPA, Taj Tea House. So maybe or YouTube, you put
yeah,
on her
YouTube.
favorite artist concerts. And
Yeah.
best thing to do when a parent says these things is just ask the question, why are you saying this? Or what is making you say that? There is something underlying, some
Yeah.
anxiety,
Yeah.
some worry, something. Maybe she's worried about your sister going to hospital. Maybe she's worried
Yes,
that
she is.
she's not gone to see her at all. Or
Yeah.
it is okay also to take your mother in a car for a drive, as far as
Yeah.
you don't open the window. And
Good.
maybe in the morning you can just take this whole idea of just getting out of the house, make her wear a mask, make
Yeah.
her wear sanitizers, let go for a round, you and your mother, if you can drive, just go
Yeah.
around the block and come back.
Right.
So these things, indulge in music, explore. Always best to say, why are you saying this?
Yeah.
What is making you say that? At least the
Mm.
hidden fears come out. And
Yeah.
then you can explore on that, saying, I don't know, maybe you can FaceTime with your sister. I think all these small things, I make it a point every morning and night to FaceTime my mother with my sister.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah, and you said a very valid thing. My mother is worried for my sister, because my sister is, being constantly exposed to all of this, because now
Obviously.
Nanavati is designated. I mean, it's a COVID
Yeah.
hospital now, so she
Correct.
is
So
worried.
I'm
Yeah,
sure, and a mother is a mother is a mother. So I
yeah,
think and this whole thing, this uncertainty is getting to normal human beings like you and me,
yeah, true.
younger people. When will
Yeah,
it over? When will life become normal? When
yeah,
will I be able to just go down and meet four other people?
Yeah.
yeah, true.
Those things, it's getting to all of us. So I think it's best to explore, indulge in what she likes to do. And I think once a week, just take her for a drive. I know 75-year-olds shouldn't be walking on the road, but in your
Yeah,
own car, wipe the
yes.
car down, go in an AC, just two of you. It at least will change your mind. Maybe you can buy ice cream and come with ice cream back. Something small.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think I should do something.
Small things only make a difference because you do end up getting cabin fever.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thank you so
All
much
right.
for that.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dhanashri.
That's
Um, moving on, there's a question in the chat box, and I'm going to partly take that. Uh, Rajam, it says, why do some caregivers don't accept themselves as caregivers? So, Preeti, would you like to speak about this? Is Preeti on the call?
Hel- Hello.
Yes, Preeti.
Hi, Bhavna ma'am.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah. So, like, I went with Nabya once in my area as a field work. So there I saw like 2, 3 of I met caregivers, but they don't accept themselves as a caregiver. They are just like, yeah, we help them. They are our children. They are my parents, or they are my what we say, mother-in-law, just like that. But they, when I told them, like when I trying to explain them, like this is what caregivers do, even you have to take care of yourself, but those people, like those aunties or those my cousins or the whoever, they don't accepting themselves as a caregiver. So why is, like, why people are, what is the reason behind it? Just for my like knowledge, I have no clue about it. So yeah.
Do you
Rajam,
want to do that,
I,
Bhavna?
yeah, I can definitely take that. So we've had some conversations, and we find that we have a society and we have a culture in which looking after our family members is expected. That's how, those are the cultural norms with which people have been brought up. It is
Okay.
a social expectation. It is a family expectation. That is what is our culture, is something that you would have been. So a very large number of people feel that it is a part of being a caring relationship. So I'm a good daughter, therefore I do this. I'm a good son, and therefore this is a part of being that. We don't see caregiving as decoupled from being a daughter. So we don't see that I'm a daughter and a caregiver, and a
Okay.
person myself. In fact, that's the biggest challenge. One of the things that we say is that, how can a caregiver see themselves actually as three different entities? One, what
Okay.
is your relationship? Two, the fact that you're a caregiver, and three, that yourself is different from both, your relationship and the fact that you're a caregiver. When you can see that, you will be able to manage that a lot better. You will be able to look after yourself with compassion. You will be able to recognize your relationship, and you will be able to do justice to the whole caregiving. The whole point that Dr. Rajan was speaking earlier about me time, for example, the moment you say that I'm a person myself, I'm a caregiver, so there is time and space for me to be a daughter. There is time and space for me to be a daughter or a wife or a mother or a whoever.
Okay.
And there is time and space for me. The moment I can create these boundaries, I will be able to be a more compassionate person. I will also be able to be a sustainable caregiver.
Bhavna, I would like to add something here. If
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yes, Tanish.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you said is right, and what I feel about this whole care caregiver thing is that, um, you know, when we are staying with the person whom we are caring for, be it your mother, your father, or your child, you know, we don't really separate the roles. As in, you're a mother or you're a daughter to your mom who's staying with you, but you don't say that, okay, now I'm a daughter and now I'm getting in the role of a caregiver. I think once we have that clear demarcation in our mind that, okay, this is my life as Dhanashri and this is my life as a caregiver to my mother, once I understand the two different roles, I think only then can we do justice to both. You know, sometimes we take the whole thing for granted that, okay, this is what's going to happen in the whole day. And then towards the end of the day, we realize we are very stressed and we're trying to figure out why and how can we change it, or what is it that the next day that we can do differently so that we get less stressed. But I think the crucial point here is that if we identify our role as a caregiver, that, okay, I am doing this for her, for my father, my father-in-law, whoever it is, and it is a special thing that I'm doing, special in terms of a special role that I'm playing now, so that I help them, you know, to recover or to help them to ease their pain or whatever their suffering might be. If we understand that difference for ourselves, I think we can even bring down our own stress, because then you know that, okay, I'm doing this caregiving thing, I am also my own person, I need space for myself. And once we know that in our mind, I think we can do justice to both.
Thank you for that. I hope that addresses your question, Preeti. We are 3 minutes away from ending our webinar, and I'd like to take this question that has come up, which is Harsha. Speaking about myself and my mother, take care of my father who's having Alzheimer's. I had postponed my master's plan 3 years back, but that's the only way I have to continue my career. I'm about to leave for my master's. How do I deal with the stress in balancing both my studies and caregiving? Dr. Rajan?
So Harsha, very, very difficult situation. So first few questions is, where do you have to go for your master's? Are you there, Harsha? The US. Okay. And when are you likely to leave?
Now,
So this is a difficult situation. How fit is your mom to be able to look after your dad? Uh, so I think I'm happy to take you, separately with Bhavna and me. But first of all, how severe is the dementia? Would your dad and you and your mom be okay if he was, admitted in an institution where he's be looked after, and your mom can go and visit? What is the support system for your mother? Have you spoken to your mother? Because I think your father will not realize it so much, but your mother will need the support. So it's a very difficult situation for you to be in, to put your life on hold. And I don't think your father would have, parents would also want you to put your life on hold. So it's a very difficult balance. Second thing is, will you be okay miles away? Are you going to be okay? What is your support system? Are you be able to come rushing back? Every time you think you need to be here? How involved a caregiver are you? You need to arrange a lot of things before you leave. For example, your mother's support, healthcare. What are the goals of care for your father? Is he getting into hospital? What is his play? What all are you going to be able to do for him so far away? What is the financial status of the house? Is all the things tied up? So there are multiple things that you need to sort out before you take this. And August is not far away, so there are a lot of things you need to plan, which involves how you will be away, how you will respond to every call that comes from here, your support system, your mother's support system. Is it a possibility to help put your father in a place like, the Dignity Foundation or somewhere where he'll be looked after well? So there are some places, I don't know which part of Bombay you stay in, there is also a very nice facility which has been started in Thana, whether that's affording. So there are multiple questions, Harsha, but I'm happy to talk to you one on one.
And I think this is, so Harsha, I hope that helps you. Maybe one of the ways to manage. So here's what I would recommend. I think that any situation or anything that comes up, or a dilemma, right? You are feeling torn between wanting to do something for yourself and wanting to look after not just your dad, but also your mom. So it's a complex dilemma. What might be required is that we break it down, right? It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy answer to say, ki, stay back. And it's not an easy answer to say, ki, you can go. But this can be managed. It has to be broken down. And like Dr. Rajan pointed out, let's make a checklist. Let's look at all aspects of caregiving for all people involved. And let's see what needs to be done in each. I think the important thing is, one, to break down the problem, and two, to be mindful and keep everybody in the know. So, for example, I don't know what is the stage of Alzheimer's that your father has, and therefore how much he can participate in the conversation. But he, your mom, and you, and maybe any other person who is involved in this needs to be able to have an open, critical, crucial conversation. Maybe some difficult things will need to be spoken about so that you can then plan for it. So that then you can then, put some things in place. And this may require a longer conversation, but for starters, this is a response. I think I would like to use the same response for one other question. I hope this person who asked this question last time is here today. This question was about looking after a 51-year-old sibling who has cognitive challenges. The case or the situation between you and your sibling needs to be understood a little better. We would like to offer you help, but our thing is, please reach out to us so that we can have a more detailed conversation, because we will need more information. We will need to know who all are there, what is the state of, mental agility that the person has, what is it that you can offer, what are your financial circumstances, so on and so forth, for us to be able to then recommend that what can you do, right? One of the things that we strongly recommend is that you can, um, please don't be wary of seeking
Reaching
professional
out. Yeah.
institutional help. It is okay. You don't have to do everything yourself. So for
And I would just like to add that both these people, if they want to reach out to you and me, we could have a WhatsApp call,
yeah,
and have a chat at a designated time, convenient for everybody, so that we can do point, first of all, making the list, breaking down the issues, and addressing as much as possible. Again, I would like to say that we don't have solutions for all, but I'm sure of all the issues, we can at least try and address bulk of it, which might make the whole journey a bit more comfortable.
yes. And thank you so much, Dr. Rajam.
Appreciate it.
Always,
Enjoyed being here.
yes, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you everyone for being here. Sorry we have bust the time by 4 minutes, but we hope to bring you these weekly webinars where we will take topic one by one and address various aspects of caregivers and caregiving. Do give us your feedback. So leave your feedback in the chat box, or send us a message. Download the app as a caregiver. Download the Caregiver Sathi app. It should help you. And look at our Facebook page and our website, so that you can, get the support that you need. Be safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
Bhavna.
Bhavna.
Thank
Bye.
you, Dr.
Thank you for
Rajan.
the
Bye.
opportunity. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bhavna, maybe we need to do something on ambiguous loss post grieving session separately also.
We will. We will pick that up. We will pick that up as a specific topic.
Yeah.
And we will address grief, loss, ambiguous loss. So we would like to end the session. Please leave us your feedback or suggestions or questions, and we will get back to you.